Welcome to the Into the Wilderness podcast. Sorry for the delay of the podcast. If you normally download on Thursday morning, we've been extraordinarily busy trying to finish the series so that everybody can enjoy it at the end of this month, haven't we, Byron?
Yep, it's we're pretty much done now. In fact, it's doing its final render upstairs now on the computer, and you should be able to see it on YouTube and Vimeo at the end of this month.
We've watched it too many times.
Yeah, we're looking forward to seeing what everyone else thinks of it.
We are. Who we got on today, Byron?
We have none other than the man, the myth, the legend that is Mr. Charlie Jacoby from Field Sports Channel. I've known Charlie for quite a few years now, and we've been trying to get him on the podcast for a while now, and we both had a gap, and we managed to make it work just the other night. We had him on, and as I expected, it was hugely entertaining for us.
It was, yeah.
And
it was a very funny podcast. Yeah. I really enjoyed doing it.
I'm sure everyone listening will find it entertaining as well. It starts off talking about catapults, so I mean that's a good enough reason to listen to it.
Yeah, it is. Now, I was going to say, I'm not going to read them out, but we've had a huge amount of reviews over the last few weeks. Thank you very much for all the people that have been leaving us really good reviews. All 5-star so far, and I hope that continues.
Yeah, more please.
Yeah, please. It really does help us because more and more people are finding us now, and we're well surpassed over 10,000 people listening to our show, which is a phenomenal amount of people. And I've actually lost the train of thought that I was going to
say, it makes a big difference with the reviews. And in actual fact, if you search Scotland hunting or hunting conservation on iTunes
or UK hunting,
we're one of the first podcasts
now the top.
To come up.
So that shows you that leaving reviews does help because, you know, we're now top in the world for hunting conservation.
Yeah, I mean, we're right up there with the massive American podcasts like Wired to Hunt. They come up there right beside ours now. So, yeah, keep doing what you're doing, keep listening, and hopefully it'll grow more.
And me and Byron have actually been on someone else's podcast.
We have. We've literally just finished a couple of minutes ago.
We've been on The Hardest Kit on the Planet, brought to you by Heine Haynes.
Heine Haynes.
So we're talking about
They're
our
on next
series
Wednesday.
Next week at some point. Yeah. So if you download that, it's on iTunes. I think it's only on iTunes, actually.
Yeah, so it's an opportunity to find out a little bit more about us. Because we were being interviewed.
Yeah, I mean, though, it swung round quite a bit to talking about just hunting.
Yeah, well, yeah, so there will be some crossover, but you do find out a little bit about our backgrounds and stuff, which I don't think we've talked about on our podcast before, so go and check them out.
Yes, now, remember, you can download this on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube. Well, you can watch it on YouTube now. We're getting more and more YouTube watches, and on Stitcher for the Android listeners.
One or two bits of news from the sponsor of this podcast, which is the Scottish Association for Country Sports. Really brilliant news from them this week that they've just been elected as a council member to the British Shooting Sports Council. They're involved in a lot of the discussion for legislation in that goes on around the country and makes a big difference to basically what we do in the countryside. And another bit of news that you'll see this if you follow them on Facebook. At the end of this month, the Bonomi Review closes. And if you don't know what that is, I'm just going to read one paragraph from their Facebook post. The Bonomi Review evidence submission period closes at the end of March. If you use dogs in the control of foxes, mink, or other wild mammals, excluding rabbits and rodents, then any changes to the Protection of Wild Mammals Scotland Act 2002 that Lord Bonomi recommends will affect you. Scottish Government may well seek to restrict the number of dogs you are allowed to use and how you can use them. So if you're somebody that might apply to, don't complain later on in the year when things change and you haven't had your input. So go, do it. Add your comments.
Have we talked about the Links yet? The Links podcast?
No, we haven't.
The Links podcast we recorded yesterday. We were going to bring it to you this week, but me and Byron are still actually trying to wrap our heads around the whole podcast.
Yeah, it was quite a complicated podcast.
Yeah, it was quite a serious debate. So we are just giving ourselves an extra 2 weeks to just...
so that we can conclude it properly.
There's
a lot of facts, figures, numbers. We want to make sure that we can go and sort of fact check everything because there was a lot of paperwork flying around all over the place while we were doing it. So we're gonna do that over the next 2 weeks, and then we will bring you the Links podcast, all about the possible reintroduction of Links and the current trial, or the consultation period for the trial, which is going ahead. It's a very long podcast, well over 2 hours. So what we're going to do is we're going to split it into 2 parts, but release it on the same day. So you can listen to the first part, and then I'm sure you'll be deeply enthralled, so you can immediately listen to the second part on the same day.
Well, we hope you enjoy the show.
Yeah, as always, it's brought to you by the Scottish Association for Country Sports. Charlie, welcome to the show. You are a man that everybody knows, well, these days through Field Sports Channel. What have you been up to in the last week? Getting ready for this
in
week
the last week. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on the show,
Pleasure.
Brian, and it is a great pleasure. And I don't know about everybody knows, but I'll try to be flattered. I think the most exciting thing in the last week was the British Catapult Association Championship in South Wales last Saturday, which I went up to with my son. And I tell you that the Catapult guys are just the most fantastic lot of people. And Catapult shooting itself, I think, is probably the noblest of target sports. If you can shoot a catapult, I think that is a mark of a gent.
I watched that last night on Field Sports Channel.
The old one?
The Catapulting.
Yeah.
It was on, and it was incredible.
They are amazing, aren't they?
Me and Byron, when we were kids, we started, and I think they all had cool names like Cobra and Viper and stuff like all the different names of catapults.
Did you have the Black Widow?
Yes.
Well, my cousin
Everybody had the Black Widow, didn't they? Yeah.
My cousin Anthony, he had the Black Widow, and I think I had the Viper, which was the one with the armrest and the red bands. And of course, if you had red elastic, that made it more powerful. Of course,
You're going to hit more things.
But I get a feeling that these guys look down on armrests. I think for them, catapults it's a very cool thing. They've all got into a thing recently called pickle forks, which is a tiny little catapult, so tiny that the ball doesn't actually pass between the 2 forks. It has to kind of hop over the top of them. You have a special technique you use to make that happen. That's a long way away from the kind of bulky Black Widows. But yeah, when I was a kid, that's what people aspired to, and everybody looked down on my dad's old Milbro. But I have to tell you, I've got my dad's old Milbro in my pocket now, and I won't go for a dog walk without it. So I'm kind of coming round to the new school British Catapult Association way of thinking.
I think that maybe needs to be a podcast.
I have
somebody on from the Catapult.
I have a catapult on my wall that I brought back from Africa about 10 years ago, and it was made out of inner tube.
Yeah, stick and a piece of it.
Yeah, it was basically wood and inner tube.
Magic, brilliant. Could it knock over a running wildebeest?
Of course, I'm sure that one actually has.
Yeah, that one had.
So we were told when we bought it.
The other thing is they're amazing designs. They all specialise in making their own catapults. Milbro, I was glad to see, is still going strong and sponsoring one of the new catapult teams. But there's a guy called Asa Wilson who just makes the most beautiful stuff. And lots of other people like him, but to me, he's the kind of, I think I described him as a Lamborghini designer of the catapult world. These are buffalo horn catapults studded with rhinestones, and it's just great.
Now, who was? I remember watching. You made a film about it a year ago, I guess, the same competition, and there was a guy, gamekeeper, somebody who'd won it years and years. Who was that now?
Oh, Gamekeeper John.
Gamekeeper
Webb.
John, yes.
Huge. He is huge on YouTube. Absolutely. Catapults. I'm afraid to say, catapults are much more popular on YouTube than hunting and shooting. Jörg Sprava, who's the German guy who specializes in weaponizing everything. Turns everything into weapons, ordinary household equipment. Suddenly, you could use them to knock out an approaching tank, thanks to Jörg Sprava. But he's all about catapults. He's kind of basically a human rubber ball as far as looks are concerned. And then Gamekeeper John. He makes his stuff about cutting a playing card in half and at 60 feet. That's just amazing. You look at that and you think, no, he must have made that up, but he really can do that.
Amazing.
I never thought we'd be talking about catapults.
No, I didn't think we were going to talk about that. I think that's a brilliant start.
Yeah, I like that.
Well, start there, move out. There's quite a lot to cover in the world of field sports. I don't know if you find this. It's quite difficult. We're a very disparate community.
It's I think a lot of people probably actually don't appreciate everything that sort of field sports encompasses. You've been talking about catapults there. The vast majority of people wouldn't even consider catapults part of that, but it's all part of that family.
No, that's a funny thing, actually. Many shooters, I think, consider shooting live game or pests with catapults to be either banned, or it should be banned. I mean, I know that from conversations I've had with viewers. They were really surprised to see that you're actually allowed to go around and shoot rabbits with the catapult.
I've seen that floating around the internet, actually. Quite a few people ask, is this something that you can legally do? Go and shoot pest species with catapults?
Well, you can. You have to be careful about the animal cruelty. You can't cause animal cruelty. But yes, of course you can. And not only is it legal, but it's actually on the Royal Horticultural website as their preferred method of getting rid of squirrels. So you see, the shooters think it's illegal, but the gardeners love it.
What a strange contradiction.
You know what? Every day is a learning day, and I have learned something today.
Now, Charlie, just as I said, people know you today from being on Field Sports Channel, presenting it, and having started it. But I just want to rewind a bit, sort of back to your early years, for those people who don't know your backstory. Now, I got to know you through the early years of Sporting Rifle, or the early months of Sporting Rifle, just actually when you were leaving and going to do Field Sports Channel. But prior to that, how did your interest in field sports, how was that kindled?
Well, I grew up in Somerset, which is, of course, God's own county when it comes to field sports. I think we've got the world record roebuck head, which was this appalling peruke that somebody shot, which could barely see because its horns had grown over its eyes. We've got salmon. We have the highest pheasants, much higher than those low birds you get in Yorkshire and north of England, Scotland and Wales. Goodness me. We've got we have stags. We have red stags. We have the Exmoor Emperor, of course, not a particularly big stag, but and for a long time, the Ensley stag over the boundary in Devon was the country's biggest red stag. And let's not forget snipe and woodcock, two of my personal favourites. Pigeons were not so hot on, not as good as Buckinghamshire, but we have an awful lot to offer. So I grew up in the best possible place to enjoy these things, and my favourite things are still pretty well my favourite things. Sneaking around after trout, if I possibly can. I used to whip into a pack of basset hounds. That was very good fun. And snipe and woodcock shooting.
Okay, so it was there, it was on your doorstep, and you embraced it.
I think what was missing was wild boar. I think that would have been something special to grow up with. And
what was your move from there into the sort of publishing and media world where I met you?
Yeah, well, that was some series of random coincidences, rather like everybody's career, I suppose. But when I left school, I got very, very lucky. I got to go and work for. Do you remember a photographer called Patrick Litchfield?
It rings a bell, yes.
Yeah, so he was kind of well known in the 60s and 70s, and by the time it got to the 1980s, I was ghostwriting books for him about. He wrote one about the Queen and the Queen Mother, and so I kind of got into the writing game, and it wasn't a great many steps from there to Shooting Times, which took me on as a news editor. I got a couple of my own books under my belt. I drove from London to Cape Town.
That was on my list to speak to you about.
I wanted to ask you about that. Byron told me about this, and I was like,
diverge for a minute and tell us about that trip, if you will.
All right. Well, this was a time in publishing when they'd kind of covered all the big subjects. You have to remember, I am the master of the shallow end in the media. I'm the one with a big pair of orange water wings when it comes to writing, and I'm very proud to be that. But in those days in publishing, people did the Book of Royals and the Book of Gardening, and then they started combining these subjects. So, you've got the Royal Book of Gardening or the Cat's Book of Golf, which was very successful. This publisher, Simon & Schuster, decided to do the Rugby Book of Africa to coincide with the Rugby World Cup, which was in South Africa that year. And they dispatched me as part of a gang of four of us. I was the writer, there were two kind of subjects, and there was a photographer, and we drove from London to Nairobi and then on to Cape Town to record what African rugby was like and to watch the World Cup. So, lovely trip for me. What I was really interested in doing, though, was going shooting and fishing along the way, and I did get an awful lot of that. So that was really where the first of my shooting and fishing articles were, and it was a short step from there to go and work for Shooting Times when I got home.
Now, what was that book called? Because I was trying to find it today and I couldn't locate it. So people know.
It's a fabulous book. It's called In Search of Will Carling.
That's right.
And it was remarkably a bestseller in South Africa. Which you're going to be rude and say, well, that means 3 people bought it. But I mean, in those
I was going to say 5, but okay.
5. Yeah, that was about it. No, what happened was I have a good circle of friends, very loyal friends, and they all got together and strong-armed their relations into buying it for each other for Christmas. And we sold out of the hardback really, really quickly. I mean, 5,000 hardback went straight out the door. Simon and Schuster were just delighted. And they rushed out a paperback, 15,000 copies. I don't think quite so many of those sold.
There's probably still a few sitting in the shelf, maybe in Joburg Airport. I think I'm sure I saw one.
I think you'll find that it's still on Amazon somewhere.
Is it?
And I think if you look carefully, there's the Telegraph review, which I treasure, which was, "This is the kind of drivel that has seriously devalued travel writing in the last few years."
I've been meaning to look it out and buy it for quite some time. When I first knew that you'd done it, mainly my love of Africa and family being there, but also the fact that you drove a Land Rover down there, and I'm also a massive Land Rover fan. What Land Rover did you drive down?
Oh, that's great. Yes, it was a 109 station wagon. It was
fantastic.
Just extraordinary. Top speed about 35 miles an hour, which is way faster than most of the roads in Africa coped with at the time. And it lurched, shuddered. It had a kind of real significant list to starboard, and however hard we adjusted the leaf springs, we could not solve that. But it was a joy. It died a terribly tragic death, that Land Rover.
Oh, I was going to ask you what happened to it.
Well, have you ever tried to load a Land Rover into a container?
No.
You have to let down the tyres and drive at it really fast, and it kind of jams itself in. So we did that. That was successful. We got the container with the Land Rover in back through the port of London, which was, I would say, the most corrupt border crossing we actually had to do in that whole trip. And got the Land Rover out the other end, parked it overnight. Unfortunately, we had forgotten to put antifreeze in it, because, of course, in Africa you don't need antifreeze.
Yeah.
And so that was the end of that.
Oh no! What a sad, tragic death. I was,
awful,
a Land Rover. It needs to die facing a buffalo or something, not
yes,
because you forgot to put antifreeze in it.
Exactly. Can I tell you another?
Yeah.
My life is studded with sad Land Rover stories, but this is less awful, I suppose, in a way. A friend and I bought a little. What was the one that came before the Defender? An 88.
Yeah.
And we parked it at Inverness Airport at Mr. Potty's guest house, which is just at the end of the runway. And it was at the time when EasyJet had recently opened up the Bristol to Inverness route. So we could fly up any time we want, walk across the airfield, pick up our Land Rover and drive to the most magnificent shooting and fishing that the Highlands has to offer. And this did us very well for 2 or 3 years. But then my friend, who at the time was claiming a possible record tailback of 60 cars following this very, very slow Land Rover. I drove it to Inverness from Somerset. It took 24 hours, and I passed one car, which was a dust cart in Glasgow. He got onto the Kessock Bridge, which is the big one just north of Inverness, and all the electrics packed up. So the car stopped. So he got out, and he was waving traffic past it, and he called the AA. They took about an hour to come. Unfortunately, 55 minutes after he called them, a lady who wasn't looking very carefully just drove straight into the back of it and again wrecked the Land Rover. And that was the end of that. Luckily, she was all right. She was pregnant, but luckily she was all right. And then, of course, we discovered when the AA turned up 5 minutes later that they don't fix wrecked cars. You have to pay for that. Only if the car is whole.
So it's not covered under your AA cover if they arrive and it's destroyed.
Isn't that mean? If they come 7 minutes earlier, if they wouldn't have had to face that problem. But there you go.
No, because I think the year after that Land Rover died, I picked you up at Inverness Airport and we went fishing.
Yes, that's right.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yes. I had to find alternative transport.
Yeah,
thank goodness for you, Byron.
My Land Rover's gone. How am I going to get to our fishing destination? Oh, I know somebody who lives in Scotland.
We had some good trips. We had the Northern Irish trip as well.
We did, yeah. We drove from where we were fishing, way up north, all the way down, took a ferry across to Ireland, spent a bit of time in Ireland, came back. It was like a week-long expedition, that.
It was, exactly. Well, that's what this job should be about, really. I do find that the trouble with weekly deadlines, well, first of all for Shooting Times and later for other magazines and now for Field Sports Channel, is it keeps you in doing things in 3 or 4 days when it would just be better for the audience if you could spend a bit more time. If you could go for 2 weeks somewhere and get a really good film in the bag.
Just let it happen.
Yeah, it's got to happen. It's got to happen eventually.
Don't worry, Charlie. In about 2 weeks' time, we're going to show you what that looks like.
Have you got another In the Wilderness coming out?
Yes, the very first episode of the series of 6 comes out in 2 weeks' time.
Oh, that's going to be great. I'm really looking forward to that.
It's almost finished. It's in its final checking stages through in the next room right now.
And then we click render and hope it comes out. Hope it comes out the other end.
Yes, I know that feeling. And what sort of how long is it? How long is it going to be?
So these are going to be 30 to 40 minutes an episode and 6
Wow.
episodes. So it's sort of feature length, sit down, watch TV type stuff.
Do you know, I find this really interesting because I talked to quite a lot of the kind of traditional DVD makers. We just had all the European shows and all the people like Hunter's Video, and they're all kind of clinging to this idea that either DVDs or pay TV will somehow keep them going, and it just won't.
No.
They're all going to have to move on to YouTube and do what we do, I think.
DVDs are. I think there is so much content out there now, freely available. Unless you really, really want something, like you like it so much that you're going to pay for it. Why go buy a DVD really?
You guys are putting great stuff out every week, and it changes and it's fresh and it's up to date and it's current. So like Daryl says, unless it's something very specific that you want to watch, why would you go and buy a DVD? And Daryl and I had this discussion with, how are we going to release this? It's a little bit different to what other people are doing because it's not something that's going to run every week. And there are some people like there's Christopher Clausen over in Scandinavia, who I know you know.
Yes.
He has a format where you can pay to watch some of his stuff. But we decided, no, what we're going to do is we're going to work it out in a way that we can provide it freely available to everybody. And we want to encourage people actually to watch it on Vimeo because we think it's a prettier platform to look at.
A slightly nicer platform,
but, it'll obviously coincide on YouTube at exactly the same time for those people who want to watch it there.
Do you think you're taking a risk, though, and this is something which we constantly talk about at Field Sports Channel, because we very consciously wanted to kind of take the shooting magazine idea, which I kind of felt people had not fallen out of love with, but didn't love as much as they used to, and we wanted to put it onto some kind of television. Now, we've since discovered that YouTube is not quite the same as television, so does it bother you that, or are you worried about the fact that people aren't really used to watching what we call long-form television, 30 to 40 minutes online?
Yeah, we talked about this, actually.
We have talked about it, and the decision that we came to was that looking in the future, you're talking a year, 2 years down the line, people are replacing their TVs. The technology is moving so fast that you'll find in 2-3 years' time, everyone has a smart TV. YouTube will be available to nearly every household, basically.
Just like another television
channel.
Yeah,
and I think people are a lot more receptive to it now than even 2-3 years ago, where I think if you told someone the idea of you're going to sit in your lounge and watch YouTube like normal TV, I don't think they would have believed it. But now it's available on all of the games consoles. It's available inbuilt in your TV now. When you get a new TV, it's moving on fast.
when you look at American shows that are out that are not freely available online, but they're on all of their American hunting channels, for example, they are all that sort of format and that sort of length, and people are sitting down and they're watching all of them. And we didn't really see a reason why that wouldn't be transferable onto a freely available internet platform like the YouTube and Vimeo, other than people hadn't put it there really yet because they can tie down the advertising through the outdoor channels and that sort of thing. But YouTube's a much, much bigger platform than any of those American channels.
That's not to say that if there was a request for DVDs that it couldn't be done, because I think there is still a market. I think there's still people that want to buy a hard copy if they're paying for a hard copy of something. I know myself personally, if I am paying for something, then like a CD, for example, I won't buy it from iTunes. I'd rather buy the physical copy. If you get me.
But I suppose the difference is this is freely available.
Yeah.
I mean, what is your take on it, Charlie? Because this was actually, my next question was how things have changed so much. Social media platforms, the media in general, whether that be paper copy, moving to digital copy, and then what you guys do. You had the vision to do this, I don't even know how many years ago. You were the very first to do it in this country. And, you're the biggest by miles now, not just in this country, but I look at your stats when they come through globally. It's very impressive.
Oh, well, listening to you, it's lovely talking to a couple of old vinyl lovers like you. That's really good. I think what's really changed, and this would be actually a question I'd throw back at you is up to now we've been used to this kind of 27 minutes plus 3 ad breaks format, and the hunting story is such a great story. You start out in the morning, you go and do lots of stuff, and at the end you get this thing. We used to sit around the campfires for tens of thousands of years in the Stone Age. We did not talk about decorating our caves. We talked about the mammoth hunt. That was a story we wanted to hear. And then TV has kind of abandoned it, apart from the American hunting channels, for the last 60 or so years. And now we're kind of refinding it. And the really good thing about the narrative is, it takes as long as it takes to tell the story. So something like YouTube, you want to tell a story about a pheasant day or a deer stalk or whatever it is, you have to film it for as long as it takes to say that. You can't stretch it to 27 minutes. You can't kind of compact it to 27 minutes if it takes longer than 27 minutes. So for me, what's really changed is the kind of naturalness of being able to tell these stories in film. The fact that, we use a lot of screens now. We've got phones as well as televisions and computers all around us, and that screens are basically a good way to watch telly. They're television-shaped things. The fact that it's completely unregulated, there are some local rules. We saw Facebook banning gun ads recently, but apart from that, it's pretty good. You can say more or less what you like, and whatever you think about censorship or deregulation on the internet, it's people seem to be more or less okay at policing themselves, with a few exceptions that make the tabloids. We take all that together. I think it's I'm going to sound smug, a good time to be you guys and us.
We'll second that.
Good.
But what if you cast your mind back to when you made that breakaway? I mean, at that very point in time, you weren't following anyone. You were forging the path. What was it that made you think, this is what we need to do because this is the direction it's going?
It was not. We did not have a crystal ball. We didn't. We had no idea, and we made some horrific mistakes. The first thing we did was put stuff on our own server. We were like, if you wanted to watch our stuff, you could go to our website. It was all free, but we were paying loads and loads of money to serve all those videos. And actually, it was Nigel Allen from Airgun TV. He said, "Have you considered YouTube?" And we had a YouTube channel. We put some stuff on it. We thought, no, nonsense. YouTube's very poor quality at the time. People were saying BBC iPlayer. That's the kind of quality we're looking for. Now, YouTube is very good quality, probably not as good quality as Vimeo, but, really good. BBC iPlayer has kind of fallen behind. People don't talk about it as the industry standard anymore. And we are very, very happy being not just on YouTube, but actually being part of YouTube and, taking part in creator meetings and talking to them about things like where should hunting be, where should shooting be on YouTube, should it be allowed, should it not be allowed, what should we regulate, what not. We're always standing up saying, look, do what you're doing. Community flags things it doesn't like, and it likes things it does like. Don't wade in and say anything should be banned. And actually, to date, the only ban on anything on YouTube is something they inherited from the advertising company they bought about 15 years ago, which is, basically you can't actually advertise guns or ammunition.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But that in an advertisement, but you can show films about it. You can do anything else you like on YouTube, and pretty well the same on Facebook. I mean, the only thing they've recently stopped is the kind of free classified ads for guns.
Yeah, we wrote that down on a piece of paper.
What do you think of that, Charlie?
Because this came about from America, this gun control, didn't it?
Yes, at the moment it's a very mixed blessing for corporations to do this. If an airline, for example, bans the carriage of trophies, they get as much of a backlash as they get a kind of positive story. People don't usually write it up as a positive story, so they tend to feel it as a backlash, and therefore they just generally don't like banning things. They don't like excluding any group at all. Commerce, business, people don't want to exclude other people for whatever reason. So I think they'd probably think it was a mistake now. With the airlines banning the carriage of trophy animals, it's actually mired them in legal arguments for years to come.
Yeah,
so I think they think it's an expensive mistake. But the trouble is, having said something like that, it'll take a new employee in that role to say, right, we're going to rescind that policy quietly. We're going to take it back, and we're going to allow gun adverts again. So that could be what happens next. I do think we all feel that somehow, the world is against us in the world of shooting and hunting. I mean, the Cecil affair last year made it look a lot like the world was against us. But look at the net effect of Cecil. What's changed? Nothing. Nothing has changed. Therefore, another Cecil comes along. Journalists go to papers editors and saying, what should we do about this? Papers editors will say, well, nothing's changed, therefore it's not really a story, is it? So we have actually, strangely enough, won the Cecil round. Similarly, I think we will win the Facebook gun round.
I think maybe one of the things that has happened with Cecil the Lion is it certainly affected the people willing to take up hunts like that in Africa, and the knock-on effect of that has been less money going to those outfits, renting those concessions, and the knock-on effect of that, of their anti-poaching patrols. There's certainly been a few stories coming out to that effect recently, and I did note, as you probably did as well, that Namibia has basically come back and said, we're fed up with this. Hunting works for us. It's the reason we're one of the most successful countries in the whole of Africa with the preservation of our game, and you will no longer. You can't ban the banning of hunting.
They banned the banning of.
Great, isn't it?
I mean, I think that's a great story and a great message from a country that has stood up for itself and said, you know what?
We're tired.
We are the example of how it works, and it does work
and you
well.
shared that lovely piece on Facebook the other day about the guy from Botswana who'd gone back to his concession and had a look at it since the hunting ban had come in. He'd found that all the water holes he'd looked after have gone. Almost all the animals have gone. I mean, it's that kind of thing is so depressing. I think you have to be pretty brutal about this. There are 12,000 lions in South Africa. And 9,000 of them are for hunting. If you want there to be 12,000, allow hunting. If you want there to be 3,000, ban hunting. It's quite straightforward.
No, I mean, we talk about this quite a lot, but if you want to have a photographic safari, you can have a photographic safari in a pretty small area, relatively speaking, with a very small number of animals, because
it's a tiny market. I mean, I know one binoculars company that sells binoculars in the proportion 10%, 20%, and 70% to the military, to hunters, and to wildlife lovers, bird watchers.
Yeah.
And guess which percentage is which? I'll tell you.
The hunting's the biggest?
Hunting, military, hunting, and then wildlife.
It's hunting is 70% of the binoculars market.
That's amazing.
Bird watching and animal safaris is 20%, and 10% goes to the military. So we are 3.5 times bigger than the birdwatching market around the world.
Well, I'm just going to open my phone here because I just read this literally just before we came on, and it was out of America. Did I write it down here? Yes, they've just done a new survey. In the US, there's 19.3 million hunters, and there's 12.1 million supporters of baseball. Now, there's a stat. There's a country that I thought that baseball was the number one thing they were interested in. 19 million hunters.
It's very interesting. The Office of National Statistics in the UK For some reason, they stopped counting these numbers in 2003. Ooh, middle of the Labour government. Wonder why that was. But they discovered that basically the question on the survey was, which of these sports have you taken part in the last 6 months? And we scored over 2% with shooting. We beat rugby by a factor of 2. We beat hockey by a factor of 3. And we weren't terribly far behind football. Only 10% of the country had played football in the previous 6 months. So we're only about a fifth the size of the number of people who participate in football. I think that's pretty good.
Was that the Office of National Statistics that were collecting that?
That's right, and also, unfortunately, they've taken down those results from their website. Happily, I saved them all before they went.
I think we should petition to get that data collected again.
I think
though it must be somewhere. It will be somewhere.
Well, not if no one's collecting it. I mean,
I know, as in the old statistics.
We know where it is because Charlie's got it.
It's on my computer.
Okay.
Charlie, just to go back a minute, you were talking about your involvement with YouTube. Just explain how your relationship works, because I think it's quite fascinating that you as Field Sports Channel, with what you represent for field sports in this country, is able to have a say within YouTube. And how does that work, and why are you able to have a say with the big guns?
We are, as far as YouTube is concerned, we are a very, very, we might be the biggest hunting channel. We are a very, very tiny channel. I think we're 20,000th biggest channel in the world or something like that. And there are something like 2 or 3 million channels around the world that are kind of monetized and earning money off stuff. We have got, around the world, there are various YouTube centres, and one of them is in London. And I make no bones about it. I spend a lot of time in London, and I spend a lot of time banging on the door of YouTube saying, "Hi, it's me again." So we have got a good relationship with our manager at YouTube. I wouldn't say we have shaped policy enormously, but we have a say, and that's the most important thing. And we've taken part in things like, the kind of forward-looking stuff, like what they call creator camps. And if you're into YouTube, there's a thing called the Creator Playbook, which is a kind of insider's guide to how to make your channel wonderful. We help write some of that. So it's been good. We've made a conscious effort in this part. And one of the things we are really pushing at the moment, as well as kind of this watching brief on policy on hunting where we can, is commercializing YouTube, because at the moment it's characterized by lots and lots of people who make their money off the pre-roll ads, the ads that run in front of people. You two, you're probably becoming rich from just that alone, aren't you?
I wish.
No, you're not, are you?
No.
Well, we know how that feels. But the good thing is now you can do things like go to companies and say, would you like to run your pre-roll ad in front of our stuff? Because our stuff is very good and has a very loyal audience. And companies say, yes, we'd love to do that. So we're trying to lead the way in getting not just hunting, shooting and fishing channels, but actually channels of all kinds to do that. I found myself at a conference the other day with some football channels, and I was really pleased because I'm from the West Country. Axminster Tool, one of the best DIY channels out there. They were sitting next to me and they were taking my advice on how to monetize their channel. It was brilliant.
You're made. That's it. You've achieved.
I might be getting a free lathe. No, I won't. No, not a chance.
In terms of the content that you have on Field Sports Channel, what is your aim? Like what was your vision? How has that changed, and what is it looking forward in terms of the content that you have on there?
That's one of those very difficult questions to answer, because I can remember what I think my aim was, and I now know what my aim is. I know what my aim is now. So I think it's fair to say we always wanted to produce a weekly magazine program on online TV. If it all goes wrong and YouTube bans us, I expect we'll hop over to Facebook. I don't know. We'll make a decision. But at the moment, YouTube is where the party is. It's a social TV network of over 1 billion users, and you just can't do better than that at the moment. So we are a functioning part of the YouTube community. It's funny actually watching some of the magazine publishers going for their first YouTube channel because they're natural magazine publishers and they naturally think they should be, doing down the competition. Yeah. Whereas on YouTube, the more nice you are to the competition, the more chance you get that somebody who's watching the competition will watch your show. Yeah. So, it's up to all of us to pat each other on the back. So I got one publisher who is well known to both of us to sit down and say 3 times in a row, "Go community." He couldn't do it. He just couldn't say "Go community." Couldn't form the words.
I think that's a really interesting thing that you're saying, because you would think if you're standing from the outside and you don't know anything about how YouTube works, you would think, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to do that at the expense of the competition.
Yeah, and I need to beat them.
Yeah, but what you're saying is you need to sort of pull together and help each other out. So I know that you actively promote other channels. I mean, you always show our stuff when we send it to you on Hunter YouTube, which we're greatly appreciative of. And, that's awesome. And we give you guys shout-outs in the podcast. And
thank you very much for that. No, that's how it should be. I mean, YouTube is... It's a bit like that. You watch that film Love Actually with Keira Knightley? And,
can I admit that?
Yeah, no. Well, I'm going to. I'm going to admit that.
Okay.
Hey, this is hunting showbiz. You can say that. So there's a bit where Keira says, "I'm nice. I'm really nice."
Yes.
And that's what we've got to be like. I'm afraid. We've got to be like Keira Knightley. What a horrible thought.
I guess. I mean, the thinking behind it, and I guess you kind of said that, is the more of you that are doing the same thing, people will be attracted, and then especially on YouTube, the way it works with suggested videos, your video could pop up on the side, and then now you've found a new channel or a new person.
60% of your views will come from, I'm sure they do come from, the suggested videos box on the right. Yeah. And how you get into that box is more of a mystery than how you get into the first page of a Google search. It's very, very difficult to do. But yeah, being nice is one of the ways, for sure.
Now, going away from YouTube but staying with film, we noticed with much delight a couple of weeks ago that Country File showed, as part of one of their programs, well, it was actually quite heavily focused in that particular Country File, a gamekeeping college and what everybody goes through to become a gamekeeper. And then they ran something else, I think the week after, 2 weeks later. There was, I wouldn't say a massive backlash,
but it made it onto the news.
It made it into all the newspapers. I mean, why do you think it's taken them so, apart from the fact it's the BBC, why do you think it's taken them so long to get to that point? I mean, they've had plenty of opportunities before to do that, and I congratulate them for finally doing it, but it's been a long time coming.
Well, I work for the BBC as well. I still do royals for the BBC, can you believe it? And I also do things like hunting, shooting and badges, as and when they ask. And I think you have to understand the nature of the BBC, first of all. And it's going to be reformed over the next couple of years, which is pretty rough. And it is going to be quite a different BBC. In fact, it may even be reduced to just John Humphreys sitting in a shed shouting at the telephone.
I like John Humphreys, so it's all right.
But the BBC is a very, very special organisation, and I use the word special in both senses of the word, because it is a slave to fairness. It is also a kind of peculiarly bigoted organisation. There is, I would say, nobody I have met so far in the BBC, and I have worked with hundreds of people there, have loved hunting. I think that is fair to say. I'm sure there are people in the BBC who love hunting, but nobody I have met. And there is probably a very, very tiny number of people in the BBC who actively hate hunting and spend their spare time campaigning against it. So I'm not going to say that produces bias, because when I work for the BBC, they are slavish about not being biased. However, it certainly produces tone, and for all the time the Country File has been going, they have really struggled with the idea of presenting what most of the people in the countryside do. And the trouble with the BBC is I think it's fair to say, it's no great secret, it is the best funded media in the UK, if not the world. It is fabulously rich and very, very good at producing beautiful, beautiful things. And if we say that's disgusting, we should get rid of the BBC, just stop and think how much that actually works for us, how lovely it is, and what a low cost it is for us that they are fabulously rich and are able to do this stuff. But that's just a little bit of an aside. So when we started, and we thought, well, we're a British channel probably, and we didn't quite understand that YouTube was global, we called ourselves the antidote to Countryfile because they were so obviously, not going to cover shooting. I think they have woken up, reacted very, very slowly, but got to the fact that most people who are enjoying a national park on a Saturday afternoon are either on a horse or carrying a gun in the winter. And that, most people who manage the countryside have got a hunting or shooting side to them, and particularly that the forests and woodlands you see from the railroad carriage were not put there for your benefit by the railway company. They were there specifically for hunting, for shooting. And so with that in mind, they've got to represent what the world is like, and that is what they're doing. They're doing it in their own funny way. You will not see gratuitous bird shooting like you do on Field Sports Channel, but they're coming around to it.
Yeah, no, I was really, really pleased to see it, and I know you were actually at a meeting not that long ago, Daryl.
Yeah, I was. Well, basically, it was to do with the reform of the BBC in Aberdeen, and they were asking people from various backgrounds. Obviously, I was there representing Field Sports
and Sachs,
and Sachs and that, and they they were just asking, what people's thoughts were,
But they seemed very, very open to take on board, didn't
they did seem very open to the idea that field sports isn't represented fairly. I guess the way you said it is better. The tone isn't correct. So when they do represent it, it's never quite the correct tone.
Can I tell you a really funny story? There was a radio drama the other night on BBC Radio 4, and it was a dramatisation of The Once and Future King, the book by T.H. White, which has got the most amazing medieval boar hunting scene in it. It's a scene where young King Arthur, who's called Duart at that stage, he has to kneel on the ground and put his spear against the knee, and the boar impales itself on the shaft of the spear and goes down to the haft, and stops there. And it's just, it will make you sit up in bed when you're reading it. It's edge of seat stuff. For some reason, that was cut from the BBC script, and instead of that, the King Arthur character gave a short 3-minute impassioned speech about how awful blood sports are.
Are you serious? I'm going to have to listen to this. So it was the complete role reversal.
I am serious, but I can see how the BBC would accidentally come to that conclusion, because I can see that they would have written that wild boar scene, and it would have been 5 minutes, it would have been amazing, and then they'd have thought, well, for balance, we ought to write in the anti-blood sports bit just to get that balance in there. So they'd have written that bit in, and then they'd have found that the script overran by 5 minutes. So they think, well, I've got to cut something that's 5 minutes. I know, we'll cut the wild boar scene, and then you're just left with a bit they've written to balance it, and nobody thinks of taking it out. I'm guessing, but that is a classic BBC situation.
Yeah, no, it's as we've said this before, but as is often the case with these things, you take the Countryfile, that particular Countryfile episode we're talking about, it got picked up in the media and thrown about social media, Facebook and Twitter and all that. But in reality, a relatively small number of people. I think that the end result when it was polled was that there was loads more people in favour of what they'd done than there ever was again. But that is you very rarely have people praising you. But you'll always have people, shouting down all the negative aspects. Especially, it seems to be the case that that sect of society that is vehemently against hunting and
do you know what I found the most hilarious part of that whole thing? Because I actually read quite a few of the comments that the papers had extracted from Twitter and Facebook. Yeah. One of them was, "This is absolutely disgusting that the BBC is showing them preparing meat. The BBC has cooking shows. Why is no one complaining about the cooking shows? It's the same thing."
Well, it sort of comes down to tone. Do you remember that? I mean, with the chefs, what happened? We had Gordon went hunting on his show, and he cried. He couldn't do it, and he cried.
I know who he hunted with. I know.
Is this Gordon Ramsay you're talking about?
He's a friend of mine.
Gordon Ramsay.
Oh, yes.
Hugh, he went hunting. He cried, but he did do it. He did shoot. Mm-hmm. And then Jamie went hunting wild boar in northern Italy, and he didn't cry, but he shot, and he got one, which is good. And then, of course, Marco went hunting and was laughing his head off all the way through. So, we've seen the BBC kind of actually all terrestrial broadcasters, all the ITVs and Channel 4s, we've seen them just go through this process slowly and finally arrive at Marco Pierre White. What a horrifying thought.
Yeah, no, I think the rise of the likes of Hugh Fearnley, where he's embraced it from the earth,
like your home farm kind of. Yeah,
I think that's done hunting a lot of good, because he did go on, like you say. I think the episode he was shooting a roe deer, wasn't he? If I remember rightly, it was a few years ago.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, there were tears, but yes, he did shoot one.
Yeah, so I think that has helped.
It's interesting that this. Damn, I forgot what I was going to say. Sorry.
Oh, that's all right. It happens to the best of us. I'm pleased.
Oh no, it happens to me all the time. You should see the outtakes. Oh, you do see the outtakes.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad we don't keep our outtakes.
I was going to say, I think what you were going on about the chefs and that, and obviously they've gone out hunting. I think what always helps, and especially with Field Sports Channel and other channels, is when you show the whole process. People understand.
Not just the kill shot.
Not just the kill. Start to finish. No. People understand a bit better if everything is explained.
That's one thing that we've criticized it on the podcast before, is that there still is a lot of content out there, hunting driven, which glorifies the death and the kill shot, and with all the stuff that we do, that's not what we believe in, and it's not what we want to show.
It's kind of the state of filming, and we're all going to get better at filming. I think a lot of YouTube channels do not have the confidence to stand in front of the camera and say, "This is what I'm doing today. This is the story of where I am." So you tend to get that sort of, "Hi, it's me. This is this. Bang, it's dead. Hooray!" Which is not really enough to produce what we call a narrative arc here.
Well, there you go. Hang on, let me write that down. That's another learning.
We're taking notes.
Arc has 2 Qs. Yes.
I mean that brings me on to something else, which is how the quality of content is changing on the likes of YouTube. I mean, back in the early days of it, basically any content was watched because there wasn't a huge amount of it there. Now, I mean, I've even seen it, and my compliments and hat off to. I was going to say yourself and David, but I know that it's particularly.
You mean David?
I mean David.
You're going to say David.
I mean,
no, it's fine. It's fine.
Some of the stuff that he's been producing, and I talked to him about this actually at the British Shooting Show when we had a chance to sit down with them. It really is. Some of it is just absolutely beautiful, and you can tell it's when he's had the bit more time to do it. Like when he went over and he was filming that ibex hunt with Marco, and I look at that as a standalone piece, and I think, that is what hunting film should be like. And,
well, I have to say, when I first met David, he was begging on the street, and if it hadn't been for me, no, that's not true. David's background is in ITV, strangely enough, and he is a producer, he's a news producer, and there you have to take a story and get the juice out of it, basically. Now, the hunting narrative is a really great story to tell, so the juice means you can make it 5, maybe even 10 minutes long, and you only need 2 or 3 of those, and you have long-form TV that people will, keep half an hour aside every week to watch. So we're lucky in those respects. It wouldn't be the same, for example, I think, if it was yachting TV or ping-pong TV or something like that. We have a absolutely gorgeous narrative, but it is about following that kind of news rigor where you just look at the story from a news point of view, remembering you're probably going to end up with shooting something if you're lucky, and tell it that way. And again, I think it sounds formulaic, but if some of the channels that are putting together lots of kill shots in a row could just start to think about things like that, we would see even better quality YouTube films than we're seeing at the moment.
I think the game for filming has been raised in the last few years, and I think that's one actually due to YouTube, because people can learn from other people like ourselves very easily, and secondly, the price of top quality camera equipment has dramatically dropped in the last 5 years.
Well, it's been very galling for BBC and for ITV to discover that the 2 most successful formats on television are 2 things I hadn't even thought of. One is gaming TV, walkthroughs, which gradually became kind of like chat shows, and the other is unboxing videos.
Oh.
And if you take an unboxing proposal to the BBC in about 1998, they would have laughed at you.
Now, talking about gaming, I just remembered that the last time I think I actually saw you face to face, you were in the process of, or you had just filmed, so we're talking quite a while ago now, some gamers that you'd got out away from their console and you took them out hunting with Andy Crow. For people who haven't seen that, tell me about it.
Andy Crow and Roy Lupton got together, and these guys, they do these fantastic videos about. Well, originally they were called walkthroughs. So you're level 1 of Call of Duty, and how do you get to level 2? So you look it up on YouTube, and someone like Fear Crads or Twin Sane tells you how to do it, and those are their YouTube handles. So we said to one of the YouTube guys, can we get a bunch of these guys? And we did it twice in the end. And we got them down, and they shot real rifles at targets and real shotguns at clay pigeons. I think one of them didn't like the new version of Black Ops, so we launched that from the clay pigeon trap, and we shot that.
I remember that.
But they absolutely loved what we did for them. It was really exciting for them to try real guns. They really loved shooting. The great thing about YouTube is they're not kind of hidebound by that, terrestrial TV sniffiness about stuff. They just say what they feel like. Somebody at YouTube pointed out to me the other day, YouTube people are not stars. They're not like kind of David Bowie. They are like your brother or your sister. They're here to kind of put an arm around you and say how things doing. With that in mind, they are allowed to be tremendously honest.
Yeah.
I never really liked the word "what's up" as a kind of way of starting stuff. But anyway,
what's up?
You feel it's more personal, I guess, on YouTube. But I mean, some of Tweety Pie, I think it is.
He's the biggest, isn't he?
He's one of the biggest UK gamers, and
worldwide.
Well, yeah, and he clears over 1 million a year.
Oh no, and the rest.
Yeah, playing. I missed a trick.
Yes. If only you had been born a Swedish guy in the Midwest of America who's really good looking and girls love. Yeah. Oh well, never mind. Next time, head.
But the thing is that we spent our lives with our parents lying to them. Stop playing those.
Stop playing that console. You'll never get a job.
You'll never get a job, and it was all lies.
It was all lies.
It was. Don't run off and join the circus, they were told. Don't run off and join a rock band. There you are. It is a kind of new rock and roll, except where rock and roll took about 10 years to go from, the Cordettes to, let's say, the Rolling Stones driving a Rolls Royce into a swimming pool. That process took about 10 years. YouTube did it in about 10 months. And so all the horrifying mistakes were made in a lot shorter time.
Now, last thing on YouTube before we move on to slightly more serious matters.
Go on then. You're obsessed by YouTube, aren't you?
No. Well, I mean that after all, that is what you do, Charlie.
It is. No, you're right. You're right.
There is so much content on YouTube now. How can people filter it down? If you're looking at it for the first time, it can be. I start to look through it, and obviously there's a lot of stuff that's suggested. But is there going to be a way that it becomes more manageable to find the quality content?
Like a tab?
Well, I don't know.
Something.
I suppose YouTube recommended videos, I suppose, is as close as you get right now.
That is about the closest. I mean, you can playlist stuff. That helps a bit. You always want to try and help YouTube with the search stuff, because that's how people start their evening's entertainment as they walk around YouTube looking for things to look at. I mean, if you can put in transcriptions, gosh, I wouldn't transcribe this talk, so that'd take you months. But if you can put in transcriptions, then it automatically translates into different languages. And
I did not know that.
It does. Have you looked up the YouTube Complaints Department videos on YouTube?
No.
Oh, if you they're very good. But there's one bit where they not only automatically translate stuff, but if you don't put in your transcript, of course, they automatically voice recognize it. There is the famous. Am I allowed to use rude words on this podcast?
Yeah, we can explicit it. Yeah.
There is the famous fart butter sequence on the YouTube complaints desk. I commend that to you, because that's more or less what people end up saying, especially our lot, who have very strong regional accents, or still foreign accents. So the future is bright, I think, given the technology that's available. But I don't think it's enough just to put up a website and try and categorize it on your website, because that doesn't really.
No.
Nobody's going to look at your website compared to the number of people who are going to look at you on YouTube.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
No, so
actually, can I just chuck in something there?
Go for it.
We have this, as well as everything we do on YouTube, we also have the fabulous Philip in Shanghai, who translates our stuff into Mandarin Chinese and puts it out on the Chinese version of YouTube. YouTube is banned in China, and so there's a website out there called Youku, which is enormous. And we are, strangely enough, bigger on Youku than we are in Britain. And I'm going to bang the drum a bit here, but we are apparently, according to Chinese newspapers, the second biggest UK-made TV production in China after Downton Abbey.
Wow.
Which, well, I'm particularly proud, actually, because I went to a posh school, and my head of school was Hugh Bonneville, who plays Lord Grantham.
No way.
Yeah, so here's Hugh, and he is delivering the kind of fictional version of British life to 1.4 billion Chinese, and here's me delivering the documentary version of British life. I'm hoping that in about 3 years' time, loads of rich Chinese tourists are going to come over and ask the British Tourist Authority where they can go pheasant shooting, because that's going to be a real shock.
Yep, you never know.
Just, I was going to move on, but I actually am interested in how the Chinese channel works and how you get it on there and where you. I mean, can I go and see it from here? Can I see it from the UK?
Yes, you can. It's i.uq.com/fieldsports,
Okay.
and it is. I mean, the servers are all in China, so it might be a bit clunky. And you will see Roy with Chinese subtitles. The joy about China is they're very happy with subtitles.
Okay.
The trouble with launching German stuff is they want it actually dubbed into German, which is more complicated. But no, we're there. I mean, the really popular stuff is mainly about things like cooking. Fishing is very popular, but they also love they love the eagles, falconry. And I think the most telling thing about the Chinese, where guns and hunting are actually banned and have been since 1949, but I went there a few years ago, and there's a lot of hunting and shooting going on. But they see what we do as a luxury activity alongside other luxury activities like being on a yacht or going skiing. And I know this particularly because on the YouTube show, on Field Sports Channel's weekly show, Field Sports Britain, we have an occasional item called Hello Charlie. Mm-hmm. And people send in these great videos saying, "Hello Charlie, today I am," whatever it is, hunting a deer or shooting a jackdaw or something. In China, we have the same thing called Ni Hao Charlie. And they sent in videos going, "Ni Hao Charlie, today I am flying a kite," or "I am," one of them was base jumping, another one was swimming with dolphins. So they are doing what they consider to be luxury activities that are the same as shooting and hunting. But to us, they're not.
That's amazing.
That's
so their outlook as what encompasses that as a genre of activities is way wider than we have here.
Oh yes, absolutely. I mean, the strange thing about we get into a thing here which I think is really going to characterise what will happen next with world hunting. I mean, it sounds terribly pompous, but we all have slightly different versions of what we like about hunting. And for example, there's a group of Americans who will go to Africa in order to decorate their houses, which we find a bit weird by and large in the UK. And similarly in China, the guys I went shooting with there, they wanted to wound birds and animals because it keeps them fresher on the way to the kitchen. And we find that positively offensive.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And being British, I want to do nothing more than save the village from the leopard. I'm kind of a kind of huge pest controller in that respect. And the Chinese and the Americans just do not get the point of that, really. So, you take those sort of three examples. We have got a lot of work to bring together something like a world hunting consensus, so we can face off in the media the threats of things like Cecil. I'm just going to put in one more thing. So in a couple of weeks' time, I have been, against all advice, I've been flying the flag for Malta.
Oh yes, interesting. Yeah, Malta
is, as far as hunting is concerned around the world, it's often billed as a bit of an embarrassment. Here, BirdLife International show videos of a group of cranes flying over Gozo, and the whole lot suddenly gets shot, and you think, what was the point of that? And there are strict laws about what they're supposed to shoot, which, according to the BirdLife films, they have been completely flouting. What happened last year was Malta, a sovereign state in the European Union, held a referendum on hunting. Now, Maltesers are kind of slightly piratical, and once the BirdLife International people got the Catholic Church on their side, the way the hunters won, and they only won by about 0.5% of the vote, was by getting the local automobile association on their side. Cars are more important than Catholics in Malta. But it was a very close-run thing. Now, last year, they allowed the hunt to take place. These quail and turtle doves cross from North Africa, where they are cut to pieces by local hunters. And many millions fly to Europe, where 2 or 3 million are shot on continental Europe, and a few thousand who stop off in Malta on the way are shot by Maltese hunters legally at a rate of 2 or 3 a day. Now, there were still piratical things going on. Last season was cut short when somebody shot a kestrel, landed in a schoolyard, the resulting image, put him in prison for a year. Yeah. That was a wake-up call for Maltese hunters. So I'm going to go back in a couple of weeks and see how they're getting on. And I truly suspect that they will be behaving immaculately this year, because they have been very severely rocked by this whole process, and they do not want to put a foot wrong. You could argue that maybe BirdLife have done them a favour, made them start behaving. I think that is an argument, but at the same time, I am very, very happy that the likes of Chris Packham and Bill Oddie, who were leading the charge against Malta as a nation, did not succeed in getting hunting banned there, because then they would have gone around saying, we got hunting bans in an EU state. We can do it once, we'll do it again. And that would have been very bad for us.
I saw Bill Oddie along with MP Simon Monaghan.
Yeah,
I'm trying to remember his name
yeah,
now.
he was against the League Against Cruel Sports poster, and there was another MP that did it the other day. Mary Black. Mary Black, she did it the other day as well.
They got quite. Those MP, are they MSPs? Those two?
No, they sit in West.
Mary Black sits in Westminster.
Yeah.
But
I don't know if you guys have thought about independence. You want to get rid of those MPs, really?
Well, talking about independence, since you brought it up, one thing which has just literally came through my feed today via the Scottish Association for Country Sports Facebook page, who are the sponsor for this podcast, was that they're keeping very close tabs on what's coming through with the land reform bill. I know you spend a lot of time in Scotland, and you've enjoyed hunting and fishing up here, and it is now official that they will be going through with a sporting rate tax, although it doesn't seem clear quite at this minute in time exactly what that's going to entail and who's going to be affected. But it certainly seems like it's going to be a small number of large landowners, and that it won't apply to small farms and what have you. I mean, what's your take on the land reform bill and how that's going to affect us, Charlie, from south of the border, if you like?
It is terribly difficult for somebody with a strong English accent to comment on the Scottish situation, but that's never stopped me before. So I'll try. It seems to me that Scotland is cutting its nose off to spite its face on this one. I completely understand why a Central Belt politician would not like the idea of great big chunks of the map they're looking at on the wall of their office being coloured English. I completely see why they would want to try and stop that in the simplest political way they can, which is, if I was going to be English about this, compare them to Robert Mugabe and his land reform activities. Mm-hmm. But let's not do that. There's no point doing that. Oh, I just did. So I think the problem is these Scottish states are economically viable in a very, very small way. Yeah. But they're just as economically viable if there's some absentee landlord owning the sporting side or if there's not. I think the good thing the land reform has done is concentrate the minds of English landowners and make them realise that they have got to smarten up their acts and do a bit more PR. And I would say that the successful ones I visited over the last few years have definitely been doing that. So that's good. But at what cost? The cost is, it would be a very silly person to buy a sporting estate in Scotland right now, because they have no guarantee that they will own it. You know, the security of tenure is kind of written into British law, but no longer into Scottish law. And there just seems to be a desire to rid Scotland of non-Scottish landowners, which I worry about. One piece of interesting news this week, I don't know if you spotted it, but the Kennel Club has just bought a very large grouse shooting, pheasant shooting estate.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah,
yeah.
£9 million was it, or something like
absolutely,
that?
as cheaply as they could. I mean, 7,500 acres, fantastic place. Not in Scotland, about a mile from the Scottish border, but not actually
I saw
in
that.
Scotland. Whereas, you know, a year or two ago, the obvious choice would have been Scotland. How does that have an effect on the locals? You know, the movement of enormous amounts of money and land being grabbed from under their feet. I think it's a bit like, in a way, it's the African big game hunting debate. You know, it has more of an effect than we think. You know, it is about quality of life improving. It is not about locals getting rich because the land that they are renting has been sold from underneath them, but it is about new investment coming in, and just like in Africa, you know, somebody comes and shoots a lion. Well, that means not just a new hospital for the local village if it needs one, but a swimming pool for the wildlife manager's house, which means you get a better class of wildlife manager. That's one that's better at swimming. So you should have that as part of. You should. I'm sounding like a free marketeer, but I think you should have that as part of your land buying, land owning process. I think it is a good thing.
We're going to tackle it at a later date. It probably won't go into it any further here, but it is something obviously that needs to be discussed because it is ongoing as we're recording this podcast. Yeah. And in terms of what we talk about here, the implications to those rural communities and to the wildlife that lives in those remote areas is what we want to tackle and how that's going to affect them. So, but we will. We're going to have some people on at some point in the future and talk.
In the round, it just looks like Scottish politicians are not understanding the rural community. And I thought the SNP was the rural party originally, but it just seems to have lost touch. I mean, the airgun situation is dotty. The police are going to have to make, in the 6 months between July and December this year, possibly hundreds of thousands of home visits if they're going to license all those airguns. I mean, that's not sensible.
Yeah, we're going. That's actually another thing that's coming up fairly soon. Certainly in the next 6 weeks or so, we're going to be recording something on that and giving people all the information they need. And if they need to know any information, SAC's Facebook page actually is a good place to start because they have all the up to date.
I hear they're actually. I read somewhere that the police are actually already saying you can hand in your air guns that you don't want.
They are having an amnesty.
Yeah,
it would be far cheaper for them to get everybody in Scotland to hand in their air guns, but you know. Air gunners don't hand in their air guns easily. I suspect most of them will go for the licensing, and that's going to put a huge amount of pressure on the police, and that's going to mean, crimes unsolved.
Now, from that to a British, if not English thing, the CLA Game Fair, which now is no longer in existence because last year was the last year it ran. For those people who are into field sports, who like going to game fairs, what on earth is happening this year, Charlie? Because there's so many hats up in the air right now.
And I know you covered it quite extensively on field sports.
Yeah, you had a Punch and Judy show at one point, if I remember.
I had the joy of going to commission a Punch and Judy man to read out my script. Oh, there are some real perks in this job, and that for me, that was one of them.
So you actually got a professional to do this?
Yes, he's retired, but he still has all the kit.
Oh, brilliant!
And he's up in Weston-super-Mare, not very far away from me in Somerset. And if I could use him again, I was so disappointed when Countryman Fairs pulled out. And they were going to have one of the many game fairs that were taking place on the same weekend. I mean, that would have been great, but no. It looks like a terrible car crash, doesn't it? I don't think we can judge at the moment. They're all picking up speed, they're all putting out press releases saying how marvellous they are, and that's terrific. They're all advertising with us, so my official advice is go to all of them, definitely. But I think the Moy Game Fair might be more of an example of the future shows, and the Scone Game Fair too.
I love the Scone Game.
The only
Well,
thing
on our
I think
doorstep.
That's on our doorstep, so that's the one we've gone to for years.
So head north. And actually, Countryman Fairs has just come out with a with an announcement today. They are doing a kind of gun road show, and if that works, if that's a way of showing off new guns, which people like to see. We established in the 1980s, retail is news. Therefore, if Countryman Fair's idea works, then you don't need a huge game fair. I talked to the Time Inc. lot, who are doing Cornbury in June down in Oxfordshire, and they are not planning to put on a major, massive, 150,000 strong game fair.
Okay.
The other two, I think, would like it if they could achieve that. They haven't ruled it out yet. But, you've got the one at Stoneleigh, middle of July, which, if it goes well, will be like the CLA Game Fair, and if it doesn't, then it'll be a summer British shooting show, which is not bad. And then you have Ragley Hall, which is probably ahead, definitely ahead on stand sales, and they came a bit late to the party with getting the gun trade in, but they seem to have got most of the gun trade in now. So
remind me, who's organising the Ragley Hall one, Charlie?
That's the team who organised the last CLA Game Fair.
The previous CLA, yeah.
But with some essential changes. So that doesn't sound quite as bad as I make it sound.
Well, no, I'm just thinking that if the CLA kind of failed because it couldn't make any money after however many years it ran, then if the same team are involved, how does that work?
Yeah, I went to Glastonbury, which is in Somerset, and I should say is pronounced Glastonbury if you live in Somerset. All right, don't be modern and the BBC and call it Glastonbury, because it's not called Glastonbury. I went to Glastonbury, and in order to leave Glastonbury, you have to face the fact that the people organising the traffic management are hippies, and they are amazing. You are out of Glastonbury in minutes, and you are onto the main roads, and you are away. Now, try and leave the game fair at rush hour. It's organised by former army officers wearing red trousers and tweed jackets, and they are completely hopeless. And I think probably that was what characterised the problems of the CLA Game Fair. Okay. It was too many RC men in Panama hats and golf buggies directing and not actually helping.
I have to say, it upset me a little bit last year at Scone Palace. The £4 parking charge that just appeared out of nowhere. I mean, I'm sure.
They do that. They go, how are we going to make some money? I know, let's rinse the visitors.
We were already there. We had no choice.
Yeah, I know. We will. In fact, I'm going to make it my mission in the next few weeks and ask them why, because we've been going for how many years now? I don't know, almost a decade, and we've never had to pay. Then one year, rock up £4, and then obviously you've still got your 50.
The thing is, I didn't mind too much paying it, but I just wanted to know that I was going to be shanked as soon as I parked my car.
Well, that's exactly it. It's like when you get to the front of the queue at Costa Coffee and they charge you £7.50 for a hot cup of hot chocolate and a biscuit. You go, if I'd known that, I wouldn't have spent £7.50 worth of my time queuing.
Well, you went to Costa. I mean, you should know that in the first place.
I don't think we're ever going to have them as a sponsor, so it's not a problem us saying that.
You're outing the real Charlie here, aren't you? The one who likes to hire a Punch and Judy man and drinks lattes. It's terrible. No, but what they do is they look at the accounts and they go, right, how are we going to make some more money? I know what, we'll take it off the visitors, or they say we'll take it off the stand holders, or they should look at it a little bit more creatively. There's a huge amount of sponsorship opportunities to be had at game fairs, which I don't think the old CLA Game Fair was looking at all well. Land Rover would sell up to, not far short of 100 Land Rovers at every game fair, and they just bought a little stand. They should be in for some major sponsorship, I would have said, for that kind of thing.
Yeah, you would have thought. I mean, I didn't know that number. That's
should we try and get a sponsor for our car park space?
Yeah. What about that lady from Stagecoach who lives at Beaulieu? How about her?
Not a bad idea. Not a bad idea. Oh, yeah, well, I guess we're just going to have to see what happens. When we get to this, we're going to go to the ones we can go to, the ones we can make, depending on our filming schedule and what have you. And, I enjoy going to the game fairs and seeing everybody. The British Shooting Show, which I noticed that you were absent at, Mr.
I was at Dortmund Jagd and Hunt that weekend. It was a major clash,
I tell you what, let's just talk about that for a second, because a friend of mine, Nick Latus, he was at that show. I don't know, you might have bumped into him, actually.
I know know Nick, yes.
Yeah. He was there somewhere with Tommy, the great Tommy Hines from Ireland.
Ah, my lord.
And he was saying how different the German shows are compared to our shows here. But you obviously have good experience of both. Just for those people who haven't been, is it an experience worth the trip over the water?
It's definitely worth doing once to work out whether you like it. I mean, for one thing, they talk about different stuff over there. I mean, we are all basically addicted to fat pheasants, and they are all completely besotted by wild boar. So you have to accept that. I did actually hook up with a party of Brits who was over there, staying with this absolutely charming German stalking agent friend of mine, Michael Sommer, and he had some Brits over. And of course, the first thing they did was make a beeline for the Rigby stand and talk about buying rifles. I thought it was strangely pointless coming all the way to Germany to talk to an English rifle maker. But I liked it. It's clean, it's efficient, it's functional. It's in a tin shed like the British shooting show, but it's less kind of ramshackle. I'm in terrible trouble for saying that, but it looks less ramshackle. But I think there's one thing that all of these game fairs could do, and the British Shooting Show as well, which is not a game fair, it's a gun show, and that is they could, and they nearly did with the CLA Game Fair, make a bid to become a really important stop-off point for world shooting manufacturers.
Yeah.
The CLA Game Fair happens at a good time because most of the guns we use are made in continental Europe, where they love shooting roe, and the roe rush is on at about the same time as the CLA Game Fair. So both Stoneleigh and Ragley will probably have a smattering of Germans from the original manufacturers who are also keen to do some buck hunting while they're over here. I think that's to go for. If it wasn't for that, my favourite game fair of the entire season actually remains an agricultural show. It's next to my mum's house on Dartmoor in Devon. It's the Chagford Show.
Okay. I don't know anything about that.
It doesn't have many stands. It hardly has any engines or any generators. So it has what passes for a big wheel, especially by Devon standards. But as far as I can tell, it's hand operated. It's just a lovely fair that includes a lot of carriage driving and hound displays and horses and terrier racing and lurchers, and sadly no guns, but maybe that will change. And a lot of local businesses.
I like those. We have one here. We've got the Angus show, and there's one over in Glamis as well. And you've got a nice, and the Fetcairn one as well, and a nice sort of community feel about those. And you always bumping into people.
I'm not so good on the really big agricultural shows. I went to the Great Yorkshire Show last year, which was nice, but it's kind of slightly alien. It's all about people rushing around making sure they've got the biggest sheep, and that's not quite my thing. But the Chagford Show is just the right size for me.
Now, we're going to wrap up fairly soon, but I wanted to ask you about what you think the shooting community in this country need to do, looking forward now. I mean, we do feel like we're kind of constantly under attack and fighting it from every angle, and we've kind of touched on that today. But, there is an attitude and action that we need to take going forward, and now more than ever. What do you see as the kind of next steps? Because you're kind of in touch with it. You speak to a lot of people within the industry. What's the kind of feeling there, and what do you think?
Well, actually, David Wright, my founding colleague of Field Sports Channel, I think he was the most marvellous breath of fresh air when he arrived for shooting. Quite a lot of us, you and me, Byron, we've been writing about shooting for a long time. We had to an extent got into a bit of a rut. We considered shooting to be a very insular activity, and that it was very difficult to get people involved in it. And David turned up, and he just used the three words, loud and proud. And that is what we need to be. I would add to that, I would say we have got the most fabulous story to tell. Hunting is the story that we want to hear. It's the story that kept us going throughout the Neolithic period when we didn't have EastEnders. And for me, it's a 5-word motto, actually. It's all about audience.
Yeah, and being able to interact with them and try and tell them the truth.
Yes, it's a social audience now. I think we can leave behind the days of TV. Oh, just one thing on the days of TV though. Did you see the Crufts story about the German Shepherds?
Yeah, we did.
Have you looked into that, Charlie?
Well, to the extent that the Kennel Club joined the kind of social media slagging off the woman who owned it. And the poor woman, whatever was wrong with that dog, it was the proudest day of her life, winning Best of Breed at Crafts. And she stood up afterwards and said, but I've won all these prizes before and nobody's ever said anything. It's so unfair. And she was being condemned by Claire Balding and condemned by that Irish vet and condemned by the Kennel Club itself. That was a good example of traditional TV trying to do what social media does. And I wasn't very comfortable with that, actually. Whatever the rights and wrongs of the case were, and I must say, you look at that dog walking around the ring and you think, it's not right, it really isn't. Yeah. But there could be a very good reason for it. I don't know what it is. I just didn't like the way that terrestrial TV, which is not social, is a top-down medium, is suddenly joining in with this chorus of disapproval. And when you are the heat of a social media storm, it feels more awful than if you are in the heat of a Sunday Times story. I have done both. On Fieldsports Channel we get about 24 death threats every month.
Really?
Don't worry, they don't carry them out. It's fine. But
you're still here, certainly.
Living
if the line goes dead,
we have covered this a few times on podcasts about social media and the way people behave, and
wouldn't behave like that.
Wouldn't
to
behave
your face.
That to your face, and evidently people are sending you death threats, which is.
No, I rang up a couple of them which was a lovely film. It was a joy to make, and I said, "Hi, it's Charlie. You want to kill me, do you?" And he went, "Well."
What, did they leave you a number?
What? It's quite easy on social media. Just for a little bit of googling, and we get so many that out of a few months' worth, you can definitely track down a few.
Oh, brilliant!
Some of them use their company email address.
Well, what I find fascinating is, this is just from reading stories, is some of them are people you would not expect, people of some kind of position.
Yeah, in banks or whatever.
We saw this recently with the poor lady who died out hunting with the Fitzwilliam, and the aunties came on and said, good riddance. And some of those were teachers. There was a Brownie leader or Cub Scout leader amongst them, and an extraordinary mixture of people. And there's a very good Facebook page that set about getting them all sacked.
I was really pleased with the work they'd done, and again, I commend them for the work they did.
That was a good marker. I gave that story to the Sunday Times, and they ran it very well, and put a kind of a line in the sand there and said, please do not do this kind of stuff. But that said, death threats are very easy to make. When you are looking at your phone and watching TV on it or looking at your computer, you have a very personal relationship, and you feel, you are God of your own future. You can say whatever you like. And actually, I react more strongly to those politicians who go, "Oh, I had some death threats. Oh, it's terrible. I'm going to be killed." Just get over it. People are like that. The first time you're at the centre of a social media storm, it feels really horrible. But actually, it's not. And if you can cope with that, the next time you won't feel it at all. And as far as politicians are concerned, who should know these things, I feel no sympathy at all when somebody is mean to them online.
I guess you could just turn off your phone and disappear in the hills for a few weeks. That's one option.
Yes, the really tricky thing is what to do if the only Google search result for Darryl Pace is, he is an animal killer. Look at what happened to, Charlie Green.
I know. We're going to get him on, actually, at some point
soon.
Oh,
good, yeah. Because he had a really rough
terrible,
time.
terrible what happened to him.
And that was a combination of social media and the Daily Mirror. And my advice to him was, you have to think of it as tomorrow's fish and chip wrapper, which, technically it's digital, but it is, more or less. And also, you have to, the only thing you can do in that situation is swamp them with good stories. If you're worried about how this is affecting your life, if it always says Charlie is a really horrible guy, then just make sure that that's off the front page of Google, and your life will improve.
Move on. I don't get that many, but on the odd occasion that I do, my new policy is to screenshot the message that's sent to me and then put it all over social media and tell everybody to say hello to the person.
That works exactly. That is.
We know that the last guy I did that to, he was so upset that everybody, and to be fair to the people who commented, no one was abusive back to him.
No,
but they expressed their distaste in what he had said to me, and I think it was something about you, Daryl. And
called us murderers and stuff like that.
He actually he knew a mutual friend of mine, and he asked this mutual friend if I could take that down because he felt so terrible about what he had done and so on and so forth. So I said to my friend, I said, you know what, because you've asked me, he said, I wouldn't normally ask you to do this. I said, look, because you've asked me, I'm going to take it down, but make it very clear to him that I'm not taking it down for him, I'm taking it down for you.
This is how social media works. That is a really good parable of exactly how it should be.
And he said an apology. Just putting that out there, I mean, he apologized.
Yeah, he did. And I did let everybody know that he'd apologized afterwards. So, that credit to him for apologizing.
There are rules which, this is something which, again, I think people struggle with, is there is a very old-fashioned set of laws in the UK to do with bullying, which is now cyberbullying, and copyright, which is now a mash-up in YouTube terms. And a lot of these things are covered by UK law, but actually it's more about the individual social media you're using. And there are very good rules on Facebook and YouTube for looking after these things. If you find yourself at the wrong end of something on one of those and you want to react, don't call the police, don't call a lawyer, just go into the Facebook or the YouTube or the Weibo or Renren or whatever social media it is, go into its system and you can usually sort it out. If you can't sort it out, like you did, basically, face-to-face or through a third party.
Yeah, no, that's good to know for those people. The people who in the hunting industry who seem to take the most abuse are actually, seem to be the female hunters. And I was another thing because I know that you have Michaela comes on yours. We had her on the podcast.
We were speaking to Michaela last week.
But she did, didn't she? Yes, exactly. The fabulous Michaela. I mean, we try. I'm falling over my words now. No. What we try to do is, first of all, say it does not matter to us whether you are a girl or a boy or old or young or able-bodied or disabled or, you've got 5 arms growing out of your ears. If you enjoy hunting and shooting, then we love you. We think you're great. Unquestionably, Michaela, for some people, not all of us, is attractive and fun to watch. She has got a terrific turn of phrase. I mean, I love that.
Yeah.
When we had the Cecil thing kicked up, she had just sent us Baiting a Hyena, a fabulous film where she goes out into the bush, she shows how it happens, she informed the debate. She looked for a vulture in the sky and she saw it and she went to where it was and she found a rotten old impala and she put her hands into its guts and spread them out all over the ground and then dragged it to provide bait for the hyena. And she looks at the camera while she's retching at one point and says, I tell you, Africa is not for pussies.
Yes. We had to put a double explicit on hers.
Not only did we have to put an explicit,
we had to beep her out.
We've never had to beep someone before.
Yes,
there's lines that even we have to draw, and we couldn't broadcast. She said.
Well, she's a good girl.
No, she's great.
She shoots lions. That's a tough one for some people. But again, it comes back to we are trying to find, or we are slowly growing organically a sort of a consensus about world hunting and things we like and things we don't like. 10 years ago, all we had was the Safari Club International's fair chase statement, which was, do not shoot at animals if they've been locked in a cage or tied up. Now we are getting a much clearer picture about what we, the world, likes and we, the world, don't like. And it means things like Cecil, even going back to, problems we in the UK face, like the National Trust banning stag hunting on its land. And I am a huge supporter of stag hunting. It has nothing to do with dogs ripping stags to pieces. It is all about managing a very, very widespread herd of animals across Exmoor, which needs, a single point to manage it from. And if we had known what we know now, we would never have allowed the National Trust, through the media, never have allowed them to ban stag hunting, whatever their barking mad scientists have come up with.
Yeah. That's the danger, is that, one thing gets banned and it rolls onto another. Often the reason for banning whatever it is in question is on very, very weak foundations. We did an interview, I think we were speaking to Jens, who you know from Denmark, and he was talking about the foundations that they banned the use of lead ammunition in Denmark.
Yes.
And he was saying that, today, everybody's happy to be using steel and, they're getting on fine with it. However, the basis that they banned it on in the first place was very, very weak. And it should have never really have gone through, because we were asking them about our situation here, and it's now, the government has turned around now here and said that we don't think that there is a basis, to ban any the ammunition on lead, which is great. But at that point when we interviewed him, it was still uncertain.
Okay, I'll tell you how the process works with the antis particularly, and they're pretty good at this. They will come up with a thing, let's say something like the Exmoor Emperor. And what they're looking for when they float that story in local newspapers or even the national newspapers, they're looking for someone on our side to be on the back foot, or someone who should be on our side to be on the back foot. I'll give you a very good example of this. We had we started this whole series of Britain's biggest fox stories.
Yeah, I remember.
We had a vet, lovely guy, and he shot what was then recalled Britain's biggest fox. I think it was 32 pounds, and it was enormous, this thing. It had, killed his parents' cat, and he was a vet, so fantastic. The Sun newspaper ran a story saying, marksman kills cat-killing fox. I mean, when was the last time you remember a fox shooter being called a marksman?
It's normally sniper they go with.
Fox murderers, aren't they?
Yeah.
So what happened next was the antis took that story, and they put out a press release saying, we hate evil fox murder, and it got picked up by a couple of people, and somebody made a call to the head vet group, whatever they're called in London, the Association of
Royal College for Vets.
That's right, the Royal College of Pussyfooting, Jaundiced, mealy-mouthed, moaning vets is what they called, and they said, what do you think about fox shooting? And the answer they got at the end of the line was, and the moment they said, the antis went, we got him. And that's the line that the antis pursued. And you see it over and over again. The Exmoor Emperor was just a reasonably big stag that someone in this guy in North Somerset said was good enough to be called the Exmoor Emperor. And nobody stood up and said, it's not a very good stag.
Yeah,
and so that story ran around.
Yeah.
Cecil, the only thing Walter Palmer did wrong, and it was a pretty stupid thing to do, was to try and hide the evidence of that collar, bury the radio collar. Everything else was completely above board, completely legal. And this idea that, Cecil was this lion which tourists would go to, but nobody ever heard of Cecil
it was
before.
all rubbish, and
it
comes out in the wash in the end.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so,
the truth comes out.
We just have to be very, very alive to this. If somebody says something to you about any story that has been covered in, that's on the agenda, on the news agenda, don't say,
one thing that is helping that is that we are slowly getting across the world really good ambassadors for hunting that we didn't have. We've had some ambassadors for hunting in the UK in the past, and I don't think that they've really expressed everything the way that it could have been done. But we have the likes of Eva Shockey, who I absolutely know that you'll know who I'm talking about, along with probably everybody else.
Girl, yes.
No, she comes across in a very innocent way, but she's a very smart woman,
yes.
And she can articulate things in the right way. Her father, who's an absolute legend, again, if you listen to him speak, you think, wow, here's a guy who can articulate.
Jim is just such a natural speaker. Yeah, that's the kind of. But I would say about those guys, they are also very much kind of industry side of things. Now, normally you think, wouldn't it be great, if someone like Tom Cruise suddenly stood up and said, I love hunting, and you get the occasional Hollywood actor who does. But the strange thing we find on YouTube is that stars don't actually work that well. No. It's more about honesty than stardom. And so what you want is ordinary people standing up and say, this is great. I do have a very strong view about where the debate has to go next in the UK. And that is, I think we have to express just how much fun it is going out with a gun or a gun and a dog. And I think we have to do that in 3 parts, which is quite tricky on the media because you're expected to do everything, in one soundbite. We have to get across the idea that going out with a gun, let's say you're walking around looking for pheasants, is like watching the television with all the sound and the colour and everything turned up. I mean, you turn up your view of the world when you have a gun in your hand. It is a far better way to see the world. That's the first thing we need to get across, and that's quite tricky because people won't like that. The second thing is even trickier, and that is when you point a gun at an animal or a bird and pull the trigger, there is that feeling of 99% elation and 1% horror. And I had a soldier friend of mine compare that. He said, to shooting a man, he said, that's 99% horror, but it is 1% elation.
Yeah.
And I think maybe you could even say, over your lifetime, if you people we know who've gone off shooting, it's just because the horror elation thing has changed. But because of that elation, it has got to be something which people must try. And you can underwrite that bit with the arguments about conservation and, the fact that because we've got grouse and pheasants, there are lots of other birds there too. And then the third thing, which is really easy, is you say, and it's delicious, this thing that you are shooting.
And I think with those, that 1, 2, 3, that everybody needs to know, and going forward, clearly everybody needs to try. I think that's a perfect way to wrap this up, Charlie.
And are you a rugby follower?
I'm a rugby light follower. Yes, exactly. I struggle with the names of the players, but I get the names of the teams. What am I missing?
So it's the final weekend of the Six Nations, and are England going to get the Grand Slam? I guess is the question. The question.
It'll be answered by the time this podcast.
Yeah, but will be answered by the time this comes out.
We will know, will we? Well, to me, it all comes down to the seam bowlers and how good they are. Absolute silence greeted that comment.
You've lost me there, Charlie. I don't know if I misheard you. Or...
Yeah, no, gone over my head.
Oh, right, cricketing analogy. No, don't worry.
No, sorry. That cricket is one sport that I haven't partaken in, and before I get any abuse for not enjoying the wonders.
On that note.
But thank you so much for joining us, Charlie, and keep doing what you're doing because we love it as well.
Cheers.
Thank
Bye
you.
Now.
Well, Byron, that was a pretty good show. I enjoyed having Charlie on. It was great speaking to him.
He's always a good laugh, is Charlie.
Now, it's tell your friend or a friend about the podcast month next month. I've just made this up, but
it's a thing.
It's a thing. So tell someone that doesn't know about this show about it.
And even better still, grab their phone while they're with it.
Grab their phone.
And then start downloading it.
And then download it.
And then ask them a week later that they've actually listened to some of it.
That is your mission.
Spread the word.
Spread the word about the podcast. Hunters, non-hunters, we need as many people
Especially
involved.
non-hunters.
But Byron actually got a message the other day.
I did, actually. Yeah.
You can explain it because you got the message.
Yeah, it was a guy who I worked with very briefly, but quite a while ago. Not a hunter, really cool guy, actually. Big into surfing and sort of extreme sports. And totally out of the blue, he messaged me and said, "Oh, hi, Byron, how you doing?" The usual kind of chit-chat. What's the weather like outside? I saw that you guys were doing a podcast. I'm not a hunter, don't really do much in the countryside, but I started to listen and I couldn't stop. And I've now listened to the entire back catalogue. I was like, oh, that's so cool. There's somebody who's, is not in that world that, we're involved in. And we deliberately try and make the podcast so that it can be all-inclusive and people who are not hunters and 100%, focused on the countryside can still gain something from it. And that was a perfect example of someone who did.
Yep. So tell a friend about the podcast. That's the gist of it. Now, Byron, you were going to tell us something?
Yeah, I was, and I just want to make sure that I get it right. I was going to tell you that our sponsor, the Scottish Association for Country Sports, are going to be at the...
Northern Shooting Show.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure I got the title right.
I wouldn't mind going myself, actually.
If we are available, I guess we could. It's 6 weeks away.
6 weeks away. We'll definitely be at the Scoon Game Fair in Perth, and we're going to try and get to as many as we can this year.
Yeah.
But our year is slowly filling up. And well done to Michaela for the last podcast because she has now beaten the boys for the most downloaded.
Oh, has she?
Yeah, she has.
Josh, if you're listening to this, she beat you.
Yeah, she did for the fastest downloaded, and she's also been so she's beaten the boys now, which is girl power. That's all I'm saying.
Girl power and hunting.
Yeah, girl power and hunting. And remarkably, a huge amount of our listeners are listening on SoundCloud. So hello again to the SoundCloud listeners.
Yeah.
But thank you very much for listening. Listen again in 2 weeks' time. And if you subscribe, you get it a day early. So subscribe.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.